Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, host of the Open Line Garden Show, and this is the podcast for this week. One of the advantages of being an American garden writer is the fact that you do get access to the Garden Trends research report, which usually comes out once or twice a year. And this one is conducted by the Garden Writers Association Foundation. It is produced by Technometrica Marketing Intelligence. And one of the great things about this is that it's done well, it's done properly, and you can sort of rely on it. And that is good, because if you were in the business and you wanted to know what was going on and what the trend is, that's what this is. It's a garden trend research paper that comes out once or twice a year. Now, the methodology about all surveys is all critical. This is how you skew a report if you want to. If you want to skew it, this is how you play with this. They don't do that. And so between September 28th and October the 2nd, 2013, the Technometrica conducted a telephone survey. It was randomly selected from across the United States. The interviewers conducted their surveys weeknights and weekends in order to minimize non-response bias. And of course, they randomly selected the households. There were a total of 849 adults nationwide, randomly picked, but the number of interviews completed in each region of the country was proportional to the representation of the total U.S. population, so that it is that much more responsive to the needs of the people in each area. The data has been weighted by gender, age, and race. Okay, I have a problem with race, but that's the way they do it. At the 95% confidence level, the margin of error for respondents overall is plus or minus 3.3. That's not bad percentage points. For some of the smaller groups, as you can see, there would be a larger possible error or margin of error simply because there's fewer people responding in any given area. So let's take a look at some of the things that you really want to go and look. Now, you're going to need a good piece of paper and a piece of pencil, because this is important, okay? The interesting thing is the detailed findings. So we're going to skip through the executive short term, and we're going to go through. And we're going to tell you what people are doing in their garden, who is doing what, and how much they're spending. Don't you like that? Okay, most Americans have a lawn or a garden, okay? 68% of Americans do have a garden or a lawn, and 32 do not. This vegetable gardening has on the increase from 2010 to 2013. It is slowly growing, not stable, not going down, slowly growing. So that's important. As you realize that more and more households are actually growing their own vegetables. How much are you going to spend on your yard and garden? This trend has more or less stabilized throughout the last 3-4 years. So it runs from 2010 to 2013. And what you'll find is that people spending greater than or less than $500, how's that, has stabilized at around 68% of the gardeners with a garden will spend less than $500. For people spending $500 to $1,500, you're looking at approximately an average of about 16 to 20%, and it's on the increase. Okay, so it's increasing. For those who spend a whole bunch of money above that, that's always almost negligible. It's 1 or 2% basically across the board. And that's just the way it is. There are some who spend more and some who spend less. Whether they need it or not, I don't know. I think I spend the $500. Actually, no, I'm closer to the $500 to $1,500. Now, the people who aren't sure in that report, average is going down. It went from 12% to 10 to 4. So in other words, more people know how much they're going to spend and actually do spend it. And it's not going down. It's not going up. It's going down. So more people are aware. Here's the interesting one. Smartphone apps for gardening. Okay. Only 1 in 10 Americans use a smartphone app for gardening. And I'm going to run over these, okay? Because 83 to 88 is what don't use one. So in 2012, 83% don't use them. In 2013, 88% don't use them, which means fewer and fewer people are getting their information using a smartphone app for gardening. Plant growing tips works out at 4%. Plant identification goes from 4 to 3. Plant locators, 1%. Local garden events, 2 to 1. Garden planner, 2 to 1. And for quick response tag reader, 1% to 0. In other words, it's on its way down. Maybe it's just not as cool, neat, or whatever, or they're not getting what they were looking for. Don't know. Now, granted, it's only over a 2-year period. It is new, and I think this may grow simply when more and more people have smartphones, but at those low numbers, it doesn't look good for smartphone apps for gardening. Conserving water is an interesting one. When it comes to conserving water, 28% used more mulch. 17% of responders used more drought-tolerant plants. And 15% used drip irrigation. Now, the trends are such that more and more people are using mulch. It's almost right across the board, steady between 28 to 30, right? Drought-tolerant plants is on the decline, dropping from 22 to 17 to it's on the way down. People have been disappointed by drought-tolerant plants because most drought-tolerant plants have to have a large amount of regular watering until they get well established in order to be drought-tolerant. Use drip irrigation, basically steady all the way across, averaging around 15% over the last 4 years. Use rain barrels. Now, this is interesting. It's on a severe drop from 16 to 12 over the last 4 years. And interestingly enough, there are states in the United States where it's illegal to have a rain barrel because somebody owns the rain. Okay? So, maybe that's the reason, maybe not. Don't water at all is on the increase. This could be not because they're not interested in gardening, but it's merely a financial cost of actually watering and doing xeriscaping. In other words, landscaping requires no water. Mulches that are all stone, okay? Carpet instead of grass, okay? I'm not saying it's better for the environment, but it's less water. Didn't think about it at all, is averaging around 28% right across the 4 years. And for those people who are not sure or just refused, well, that's on the increase and it's climbing. I think a lot of people are not willing to just tell you what they're doing to get their water. How much money do you plan to spend on your garden? Okay. Now, this is interesting because it's broken down by grass, lawns, fruits and vegetables, and perennials. Okay, so here we go. Now this is the top 2. Okay, now top 2 meaning that in this past year, where did you spend the most money? 41% spent the most money on their lawn and grasses. People went down to 39% on vegetables and fruit, and we know that that's an increasing market. Perennial flowers is 29%, going down. Trees and shrubs combined, 27% on the way down. Annual flowers, 26% on the way down. Not sure and refused, 38%. So in other words, what you're looking at is there more people realize the value of grass to make their properties look good, to improve the environment, to cut down on the heat, and to absorb moisture, water, rain, and of course, at the same time, be managed properly and not overwatered or overfed. And they're not spending a tremendous amount of money, but they're spending more money on lawns and grass than they are and actually fruits and vegetables to feed themselves. Okay, try that one. Garden plant purchase destinations. This is interesting for people and retailers, but it's also good for you in the fact that it tells you an awful lot. Are you shopping like everyone else? Garden centers and local gardening stores is averaging around 39%, with mass merchandisers and the DIY stores being around 37%. So they compete heavily. But mail order catalogs are dropping. They have never been above 3%. They are now down to 2%. Internet websites are actually on the increase, even though it's from 1 to 2. People are starting to realize that they can get things successfully on the web that they may not be able to get locally. Others, in other words, what other plant purchases or places they're going to buy them, is sitting at around 8%. And those people who are not too sure where they're going to spend their money and what they're going to do with it, well, that's about, as always, about 12%. The garden activities compared to last year. Half the consumers, 48%, consider their gardening activities to be the same as last year. In other words, they're going to do as much or more. Is the trend going up or going down? Well, from, let's just say, more. Let's do more. I always like more, okay? There is an increase of about 2% who are actually going to do more gardening this year than last. A lot of people who are not sure, I make about 22%. The same, basically you're looking at around 48, right, percent. So, in other words, people are gardening, continue to garden. Very few people are actually not gardening or doing less. And that's interesting. In other words, they're finding the benefits of gardening to them, whether it be for producing food, relaxation, or even physical activity. The factors that impact gardening activities, like we're all busy, right? More than 1/3, 39%, say that available time most impacted the gardening activities. Second was the economy at 22%, and hot or dry weather at 13%. So, what you're seeing is if you have the time, you will garden. If you don't have the time, you don't have the money, and you're working, not always the healthiest of situations, then you will actually be gardening less. Okay? Weather is down like 12%. So it's not weather that's holding people up. It's just the economy and basically the available time that they have to garden. So there you go. And the trend is only getting better, that more people are gardening. Interest in organic gardening. Interest rose 42%. I think a lot of people will continue to garden and garden what I'll call earth friendly, not always organic, but the least offensive to the environment. So we'll see what happens. Those who have a lawn and garden are the base, and it is growing. Okay, so that's a good sign. So more people are growing more lawn and gardens, and more of them are doing a little bit on organic gardening, but it's just hanging around in there, and it's not doing any great guns about whether it's going to grow and everybody's going to do organic or nobody's going to do organic. It's just sort of sitting there like a lump in your throat. Interest in food gardening. This is interesting. 60% are interested in food gardening, and this can be our economy, etc. But trust me, it is growing, and more people are growing basically better fruits, vegetables, know where they came from, and know that they can do it and actually have and enjoy it. Native plants, 39% of people are interested in native plants. This one, I think you'll find, is starting to be a decline. Okay, not as many. Earth-friendly gardening and interest in it has decreased slightly to 39%. This is the indication that organic people are sort of steady. Okay, they're not really going up and down. To my way of thinking, everybody should earth-friendly garden. Okay, so you do the best things for the earth, but when you have to, you do what you have to do. And it's basically just steady, just like organic gardening. Interested in web-based information. This one, sort of steady, and it's going at around 20 to 27% over the last 3 years. That's all it's doing. It's not going anywhere, not doing anything. Interest in gardening blogs. They are better than smart apps for phones, but people are looking at them, and it depends on the information being provided. It's simply as that. Okay, so they're doing a lot better than the smartphones, and it is just slightly on the increase. More and more people are actually going to blogs. So there you go. Not too bad on gardening. Now, who gardens? I like this part. Okay, who gardens? Let's see. Okay, if you're 18 to 24, you're about 10%. If you're 25 to 34, you're about 13%. If you're 35 to 44, you're around 28%. And 45 to 54, you're around 17%. And 55 to 64, around 22%. If you're over 65, 18 to 19% of you garden. That's pretty cool. In other words, gardening is good for everybody, and everybody of all ages is gardening. Oh, here's an important one. Marital status of gardeners. Married gardeners. You're going to love this one. Married gardeners. Now, either they're escaping to the garden to get out of the house, or they just enjoy it out there, or they garden together. You're looking at 59% of married people garden. Single people who garden is down around 25 to 27%. If you're divorced or separated, it drops down to about 8%. And if you're widowed, it's about 6%. Says an awful lot. Parental status. This is based on whether or not you have children under the age of 18 living at home. If you do, then you are gardening. If you don't have kids living at home, okay, 70% of you are gardening. People who do have kids at home, about 35% are gardening. Try that one, okay? Level of education of gardeners. Those who actually have high school are around 20% of gardeners. Some college education goes as high as 30%. A college graduate jumps to 32%. Some graduate courses jumps down to about 4%. Postgraduate degree, you're going to love this one, around 16 to 17%. Wow. How much do you make? Is it always interesting? And I'm going to just sort of go and tell you this, that over the last 4 years, whether you make under $20,000 or over $100,000 a year, you average roughly, okay, around 13 to 15%. That's it. It doesn't very stay. Basically always pretty steady. In other words, everybody, no matter what their household income, seems to garden. We're going to skip the race and ethnicity simply because I don't like it, so I won't tell you. But I will tell you about males and females. Always been a trend that half and half, little variance up and down, has always been the trend in gardening. Always. Doesn't matter. All the years that I've been at it, and I have been in this professionally gardening in this since for 40 years or more, right? So, males 48%, females 52%. And this just swings back and forth between the two, and it doesn't really change that much. I mean, there is only two choices, so basically one or the other, and that's it. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you sort of wrote down and sort of said, oh, I'm this age, and I'm this, and I'm that, and I garden, and I spend this much, and I spend it on this, and get to compare yourself. But what you're saying is a snapshot of what gardening is and how important it actually is to the common everyday person and homeowner, with children, without children, at any age. I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.